You ready?
I'm ready.
Well, it's such an honor to be here with Seth Godin. Seth is going to be a very special guest at the upcoming Ocean Conference on October 11th and 12th in my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio. So excited to have you in Cincinnati. Seth, thanks for being here to talk with us today.
Oh, it's such a privilege to talk to you. You've added so much light for a lot of people, and I, for one, am a fan.
Oh, that's really encouraging. Well, thank you. So I have to ask you, so what are you looking forward to about coming to Cincinnati to speak to a group of entrepreneurs?
One of the worst fortnights of my life was spent in Cincinnati in 1982 or 81. My dad, who's passed away, used to run a hospital crib company, and he had just taken it over. And they had a division in Cincinnati, and my job was to go there and wrestle their IBM 360 computer to the ground and get the data out of it. And I realized at the end of my third day, needing a nap each day, that I could not do a job for a living. That doing a job for a living, going out for lunch as a way to distract yourself, and then going back to the grind, it wasn't going to work for me. And that was a really important lesson. And that's when I understood that entrepreneurship is not just a job. Entrepreneurship is a chance to change things. And that's what I do every day. And I think the kinds of people who are going to be at this event, that's what they do every day. They're not just looking for a job with no boss. They actually want to make change happen.
Yeah. Well, and along those lines, the theme of the conference this year is worth it. That's what we're calling it, is worth it. In your estimation and your experience, what is it that, well, first of all, for you, for Seth Godin, what has made your entrepreneurial journey worth it to you? And what do you think makes the entrepreneurial journey worth it in general for people who choose to take that risk?
Well, if we do the math, the typical earnings of the typical entrepreneur are probably lower than the typical earnings of any other hardworking professional. We're not doing this because we want a money prize. We're doing it because we want to make things better by making better things. And that's what makes it worth it to me is, since I've shifted most of my focus on being a teacher, when I see the shift that happens to people who've been through the Alt MBA, or when I see what they teach other people, that starts to resonate with me as saying this journey that we are all on to find new knowledge, to weave connections that matter, to create a kind of art that causes change, that's the reason to do it. Not because we can make a little bit of money moving one box of stuff from one place to another.
Yeah, well, and I think I think it's a really wise insight, because I've heard many entrepreneurs, very successful entrepreneurs, and you always kind of roll your eyes when you hear this, because you think, yeah, okay, sure, well, that's easy for you to say, right? But at any point in their journey, say, you know what, I would be doing this work regardless of whether I made the money that I make, and it's because I would be doing this work anyway that I make the money that I make, right? And
Exactly.
it's almost this sort of inverse thing where you have to say, I'm going to attach myself to something that's worth suffering for, if necessary, because I care so much about it. And then, the results are the results. And if there's money, that's great. But really, it's more about the impact I'm trying to create than it is about the money that I'm making.
Bingo. That's exactly right. And, when, so I've got a new book coming out in November called This is Marketing. And the essence of This is Marketing is you can't be seen until you learn to see. That selfish marketers, short-term marketers, people who are hustling, want to be seen. Hey, I made this. Hey, I made this. Hey, I made this. And it doesn't work anymore because attention is too scarce and because trust is too scarce. But if we can gain empathy, the radical empathy of not judging the people as we see them, but simply seeing them for their hopes and fears and their worldview and who they are and what they are and where they're trying to go, then maybe we can be seen. But it's not a trade. It's a privilege. It's just the privilege to say, I could do work where I could see other people. I could imagine the noise in their head. What else could I hope for? That would be great.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, when they really care about something, when they care about the outcome of their work and the impact they're making, it can be really difficult to know when something isn't working and when they need to just give it up. And you wrote a book called The Dip that had a profound impact on my life. And I know I shared it with probably 500 other people personally. I probably personally put 500 copies in people's hands because I said, you have to read this book. And the book is really, it's a little book that tells you when to quit, right? When is the right time?
It's a little book that challenges you to figure out when you should quit, because I
Yeah,
don't know when you
yeah.
should quit.
There you go. So, could you just talk a little bit about that dynamic of the dip and how that applies to entrepreneurs?
Well, the only thing they actually teach you in business school is to ignore sunk costs. And we could spend an hour talking about that. But basically what it means is every decision is a new decision based on new information and new options. And what we do with our own life as an entrepreneur is we forget to do that. And so instead we make two mistakes. Common mistake number one is that when it gets difficult, we quit. And the reason that that's a common mistake is because if it didn't happen, everyone would push through the difficult stuff and there'd be no scarcity. The reason it's valuable to push through the dip is because on the other side, there's not that much competition. On the other side, there's just a few people who have made it through the hard part. But the other half of it, which is super important, is you can't find the energy to push through a dip if you keep doing all the stuff you've been doing, because you'll just burn out. So one of the things that we have to do if we want to matter is quit a whole bunch of stuff where we ignore sunk costs and say, I'm mediocre at that. I'm not going to do it anymore. Or that would be a distraction. I'm not going to do it. So when Twitter came along, I saw it early and I said, I could be on Twitter and I could make Twitter work. But if I go on Twitter, what am I going to take that time from? Because in order to be a great tweeter, it would be more than 5 minutes a day, right? Lots and lots and lots of people are mediocre Twitter users. If you want to be a great Twitter user, you got to invest in it. Well, what should I take the time from? Should I then become a mediocre blogger so I can become a great Twitter user? Pick, right? And as entrepreneurs, the only thing we truly have control over is our time. That's our asset. And too often I see entrepreneurs stuck because they can't quit, or trapped in constantly quitting every time they hit the dip because they didn't buy in early enough to the fact that this is hard. Doesn't mean it's not doable, but it's hard. And if you're going to start knowing that there's going to be a dip and be prepared for it. And when it shows up, be thrilled, because the fact that the dip shows up is proof that you're onto something.
Yeah. Well, and along those lines, you mentioned, taking away from something to do something else. One of your practices for many, many years, I know I've been hugely blessed by, and I know others have as well, is that you blog every day, which even as a writer really astounds me, frankly. Your streak is unbelievable. Why did you choose that medium for yourself?
Oh, it chose me for sure. Okay. First of all, I blogged twice today by mistake, and it really bothered me because they were two really good posts. And now each one is sharing the space with the other one. I'm like, oh, that one deserved its own day, and I can't take it back because it was a mistake. The way my brain works is such that if I'm in a fast-moving Twitter-type environment, I'm going to make mistakes. And I'm also going to take the feedback too personally. And if I'm in a video medium, it doesn't help because I don't know how to scan it or edit it the way I can with the way my background as a writer works. So my blog started as an email newsletter, which I wrote to just 20 people who were either friends or relatives or colleagues, because I didn't want them to think I was just taking naps all day and unemployed. And so early on, I would share an email now and then. What am I up to? What did I notice? What do I see? And when blogging showed up, Joey Ito, who now runs the Media Lab, was sitting there at a table with, it was me, Jacqueline Novogratz, who I met that day, who runs the Acumen Fund, and this guy who said he was a judge. His name was Stephen. I later figured out that he was Stephen Breyer, the Supreme Court Justice. So there's the four of us. It was a good day. Four of us sitting around, and Sergey, who worked for this little company no one had ever heard of called Google, came over. So there's five of us sitting around this table, And the person I'm the most interested in is Jacqueline because she's changing the world. And the second most interesting person is Joey because he's a brilliant multipath. And on his screen, he's got this software called TypePad. And I'm looking at what he's doing. I say, that's the first thing I've seen in a few years. That's me. That. And so I was one of the first users and I stuck with it. I just switched to WordPress because the times changed. But when I see that screen open, I become a better writer.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. It's funny that you say it shows you because I feel the same way about podcasting. You know, in 2004, when I first became exposed to podcasting, I said, this is it. This is it. This is a medium custom made. Are you kidding? I can just get on a microphone and talk for 10 minutes and people will listen. Are you kidding? Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Sign me up. And it's funny how we just fall into these native media, right? And even though I write books, like writing is really difficult for me.
Really? That doesn't come across at all. So
that's encouraging to hear.
What's the new book? Because I know the last one came out, like 9 months ago?
Yeah, the last one came out in January. It's called Herding Tigers, which you were gracious enough to blurb. Thank you.
It didn't require grace. It required that was all that was necessary for me to want to blurb it.
Well, thank you. It was about how to be the leader that creative people need. I think that I've been hearing all these people come up to me for years, like, "Hey, thank you for what you've done for my process, for my work, for my creativity. But let me tell you about my manager, right?" And it's just we have organizations. You deal with this too, right? Organizations that just are not set up to facilitate the creative process very well. Right. And so I just wanted to help people understand what are some of those underlying dynamics in the creative process and what do people really need from their leaders. So it's very, very exciting to be able to venture into that territorial and dangerous space. A lot of managers get really territorial when you start messing with their process, but it's been a real joy to be able to go out and have those conversations.
Fantastic. So, yeah. But now you're a serial writer, so there's certainly a new book. You don't have to talk about it, but I bet you will.
I'm working on a couple of different things right now, but
after there are 2 books, the person has given themselves away, and they will continue to write until the day they die. No one does 2 books and stops.
Well, that's encouraging. Well, this is the 4th in 8 years. So I think I'm sort of at the point where I'm like, I realize I think this is a habit now, like you said, but I'm sort of taking my time to figure out what exactly I want to write about next. So I think we'll kind of see.
Count on me to read it first. I can't wait.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much. One more question for you. So in addition to giving a talk at the Ocean Conference, you're going to be doing a mastermind as well for a smaller group of people. What goes on inside of that mastermind group?
Yeah, I prefer masterclass to mastermind. Masterminds are brilliant and most people should be in one, right? A mastermind is a peer organized thing that holds you accountable, but it only works because you're doing it for years. A masterclass is sort of a ripoff from, if Yo-Yo Ma is going to teach cello, you get a whole bunch of other cello players in the room, but not too many, and you can have an interaction. And so the idea is I come completely unprepared, except ready to be challenged. And what happens is someone says, this is my problem, and I'm unique. And I start answering it, and people realize they're not unique. Everyone had that problem. And once you start seeing that showing up over and over and over again, you realize you've fooled yourself into thinking you have unique problems that have no solutions, when in fact, other people are on the same path as you. And I love them because it's always fresh and it's always in the moment. I don't do them as often as I used to. So I'm really looking forward to doing it in Cincinnati.
Yeah, it's going to be a phenomenal time, and people are going to be really challenged, and I think they're going to establish some new vectors for people coming out of this conference. I certainly hope so. So October 11th and 12th is the date. If you want to know more, go to oceanconference.org. Seth Godin is going to be there. I'm going to be there. Seth, I think we've only actually personally met maybe once. I think we were both speaking at the 99U conference, even though we've interacted a bunch online. So I'm excited to get to connect in person again and say, hey. So thanks for coming to Cincinnati. I'm excited that you're going to be right here in our hometown.
It's going to be a 5-star event. It's a pleasure. Good to talk to you, man.
You too. Thanks.